Hello, my name is Gav Cross, and I'm a storyteller and performer. And I tour solo, self-devised shows in many spaces and places, including libraries, rural touring, traditional spaces, pubs, fields, a boat. I create shows that are for families and young people, but also for grown-ups. And all of my shows have been performed at some time in a library. I think if you're used to rural touring, then you're used to being adaptive and going into any space. There's something special about going into a library. Libraries were always very important to me personally, as a kid and growing up. They were safe spaces and places for me, being able to take away books that I could never afford, to borrow cassettes and records and read magazines. I thought they were magical. It was during one of my first rural tours I met Spot On. I met them in Clitheroe Library, which is an incredible library. Beautiful clock that sits and ticks and adds to the drama. And if you're very good, the librarian lets you go down into the dungeon they have in the basement as well. I had an idea for a show for grown-ups, my first show, and I asked Spot On to talk about it. So I took cakes with me, a top tip, and we had a conversation. It was an adaptation of a literary Victorian piece of work, Ghost Stories, After Supper Ghost Stories, by Jerome K. Jerome. Very silly. What I didn't know is that if you're working with a creative producer, they've got this overview. If they like the sound of what you want to do, or perhaps you, they'll find ways to make work happen. For them, it was obvious to make connection with the Rekindle program of work, to go to the library service and say, we have an artist, they want to develop new work. Can he do that in partnership with the library service? That meant they commissioned me to perform several shows. There was a small fee attached, so bills could be paid, but there was an awareness that this was scratch, this was R&D. Each audience were going to see the show in development. And that was really exciting because it's the pressure of having something ready for an audience, to respect the choice they've made to come out. Some of the shows were free for the audience and some were very low price. Some were matinees by the sea, some were in ancient libraries, some were in modern spaces. And the ability to talk to the audience, to gather learning of the show, was absolutely invaluable. That library service got a series of events and I got a series of audiences to try my ideas with. One of my favourite performances was in Darwin, a beautiful library, incredibly enthusiastic librarians that want to make these things happen for their communities. They have programs of work, poets, performers, musicians, shows for children, for grown-ups. And with Spot On's ability to have the overview of what the local authorities' priorities are, they were able to join Rekindle with Refresh. Refresh was a project to get people walking. So somebody devised a ghost walk. And then at the end of the ghost walk, they came to see my ghost story show. And then at the end, we got to have a chat. And it was absolutely fantastic. That's the advantage of finding partnerships. It's the relationships, people that know what's happening where, who is enthusiastic about putting interesting events into these spaces and places. And for me as a performer, in exchange for this crucible, this scratch opportunity, I was able to develop a show at a very low cost for me, for them. And that show has subsequently toured. And because I'm a solo performer, it's always available. I think the key here is the relationships with the library services, with the partners. Either that's developing it yourself or finding those schemes and programs and places and people that do know what's going on. If I'm in a town for work or for myself, I will pop into a library, especially if it's a Carnegie. I'm a nerd, but also to pick up a program, to see what events they have, to see if maybe what I do would fit there. I know my local boroughs around where I live in Merseyside, there are so many different programs of work. I create shows that are literary. It's coincidental for me that it's the year of reading, but it has been beneficial as well. I have performed my shows in libraries to families and to grown-ups throughout this year, and I've got more planned. I know that there are different priorities, perhaps about access to well-being, perhaps about the environment, and that library services are able to tap in to small streams of funding. So perhaps you've got something that fits their particular need. If you're looking to create relationships with programmers, those programmers might be in your library, local or otherwise. One of the best pieces of creative advice I ever saw given was by Paul Hunter, the artistic director of Told by an Idiot, in conversation with somebody who wanted to know how some people got funding and other people didn't. And he very sensitively did state that you're not always going to get that funding for that piece of work, but you should never work for other creative organizations for free. That's not ethical. However, we never stop working for ourselves for free. If you've got an idea and you want to try it out in front of an audience, a receptive audience, a very cost-effective way could be in a library with an audience that's performance literate already, that perhaps doesn't access cultural events outside of their area very often. You've got the chance there to find out who wants what you're making. You need to be flexible. You need to accommodate the very individual experiences of each library and each library service and all of the brilliant people that make it happen. I know that not every librarian that's helping making a performance happen is doing that as part of their job. They're doing that as part of their passion for keeping their libraries going. And I think we in the creative arts sector can be a major part of that as well. Final top tip from me, don't borrow from every library you go into. My fines are through the roof.